All right. Good morning, all. I'm Philipp Muessig, GreenStep coordinator over at the MPCA. Welcome to our webinar and a beautiful snowy day. And this is unique in maybe the 6 years of doing workshops. We always have some people in the room and some people in the webinar, but today, welcome webinar participants. You are over 20 of you, cozy in your home. Glad you can join us. We have some real experts here, and I'm going to make just a few introductory comments. But maybe as we begin, maybe for you all to think about, and maybe this would be a way to sort of prime your thinking about road diets and prime your thinking about questions. You know, what comes to mind when you hear the term road diet? What comes to mind? What do you know about it? We certainly will learn a ton, and we'll talk about the benefits, which I think my observations really, just a couple of minute comments about that revolve around sort of the tremendous benefits. So in the GreenStep cities framework, cities are challenged to implement a road diet, road intervention in best practice 11.6, that's in the living streets or complete streets best practice. Road diets, you know, as I think of them, they address sort of this huge land use issue. So if you were to think about what are the big land uses in a city, for example, St. Paul, since I just recently looked at that, if you add up all the sort of the percent of total land area in St. Paul for roads, alleys, freeways, parking garages, surfing parking lots, we're talking, I think it was 32% of the city of St. Paul is in asphalt or concrete. A huge land use. And so part of what some road diets are doing is that they're just taking some of that asphalt and concrete out of service and repurposing it for more ecologically useful space. So infiltration for stormwater, space for trees. So road diets are very much a land use issue. Road diets offer sort of tremendous, sort of broad sustainability improvements. Most sort of immediate, I think for many people living along a busy road that has had a road diet intervention, is that they are safer, and we have data, and we'll learn about that. So personal safety, public safety, big benefit, something that everyone can relate to. Also the sort of the repurposing of the road right away for a road diet is it softens. It's a better sort of urban design feature, and it helps contribute and just helps generate sort of more wealth-related wealth spinning off from the road. Certainly for multimodalism, walking and biking, road diets can in adding sidewalk, wider sidewalk. Bike lane one or on both sides, so they have that sort of multimodal benefit, sort of making it possible, sort of building it, and we know some people come. And then as I talked about plants, trees, soil, infiltration of stormwater, space for that, space for other, we'll see other, sometimes the term sort of amenities, benches, public art, planters, signs, and then cost savings. There can be cost savings. Certainly, it can be a way to think about your city as spending the same amount of money, but repurposing how we spend that money. So we're spending it better. We're getting a better result, better outcomes for the same amount of money. But it depends on what we're doing, whether it's a restriping or a full reconstitution. But I know in Maplewood, the one road diet I'm most familiar with, in Maplewood, they did in fact save money. About $100,000, but I can't remember how many blocks, the size. But here was a case where Maplewood was extremely happy, residents very happy with a road diet, a 4-to-3 conversion, and money was saved. So with that, I will introduce the organizer of our workshop, Barb Thoman, and then Barb will introduce our great MnDOT people who are here to speak. So Barb and I worked together long ago. Like long ago at the Office of Environmental Assistance, and Barb maybe did at that point solid waste planning, or okay, yeah, did that. Barb went on to create and lead Transit for Livable Communities, which was really the TLC was really the preeminent statewide advocacy organization for bike walk transit, and managed a $25 million successful project to increase bike walk in Minneapolis-St. Paul. And we are fortunate to have her through the PCA. We have a RETAP program. Some of you maybe know our RETAP consultants do a lot of building energy, water, solid waste audits. But our RETAP people, we have an Emerald Ash for urban forest specialist like Leuer, and we have Barb Thoman, who's a specialist, usually coming from TLC, specialist in bike walk transit. And so this year she's been working on road diets with MnDOT, and we're maybe thinking about some parking pricing.
Great, exactly.
So
controversial, talking about pricing parking.
Pricing parking, you know, there's no free lunch in life, and
that's right.
So so you'll see Barb again, but this year, and obviously for today, Barb is going to begin and then introduce our MnDOT people. We'll talk about road diets.
Great.
So,
thanks so much.
okay.
Thanks so much, Phil. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and being here in the room. I think you're going to be really inspired by this topic that we're going to talk about today. We have three speakers, two from MnDOT, one from the city of Richfield. We're going to talk about the concepts of road diets. We're also going to really dig into a few case studies that have been developed on projects that have been implemented across the state. And I think the reason that all of us are interested in these projects is that they have such a great array of benefits. Benefits that go beyond better traffic movement and traffic safety, but also are about community improvement, community vitality, and active living. So I'm really excited to get started. And this effort in developing these case studies, which are sort of two-page summaries of some road diets around the state, they're up on the MnDOT website under the A to Z section. There's a link to them from the GreenStep Cities website. And then for folks in the room, we have copies in the back. So why don't we go to the first slide.
You want to drive?
Why don't we, oh, can I do it? That'd be great.
Yeah, please do. And this is left and right arrow. Okay, great.
Okay, well, we are going to hear quite a lot from Leuer about what a road diet is, but just very briefly, it's any time that you're either reducing the number of lanes, reducing the size of the lanes, but shrinking down the profile of the road, I guess, or maybe the profile is not the correct word, the configuration of the road. And the ones that we're going to really talk about and dig into today are the 4 to 3 lane conversions, where you're going from 4 lanes typically to 3 lanes, so 1 lane in each direction and a two-way center left turn lane. And most of the roads where this treatment makes the most sense are your lower speed roads. So the 30 to 35 mile an hour roads, 25 mile an hour if it has a bike lane, but in a commercial corridor, a small town main street. So we've probably said the phrase road diet, 10 or 20 times already this morning, but I'm going to try not to say it again, because who likes a diet? Nobody likes a diet, and a diet is about, it conjures up an image of taking things away, of scarcity, and what we found around the state, in Minnesota at least, is it's not been a helpful term. Up in the northwest part of the state, MnDOT District 2, the term the phrase road diet was really almost a toxic phrase in the public engagement work up there. And so we're going to try to call these really, using a more descriptive term, we're going to call them a 4 to 3 lane conversion or a roadway reconfiguration. So, and I think that was actually Jack Broz from the city of Richfield was the first person to say road diet, not a helpful term. So,
all right, change our language.
Moving on. Oops, that was not what I wanted to do. Well, the reason that I'm so interested in these and the GreenStep Cities program, I think, is interested in these projects is that these road conversions have just such a great array of benefits. So enhanced safety for all users. So that's drivers, that's people walking, that's people biking, that's people using some kind of mobility assistance device. In small towns where a road is 4 lanes and you're trying to cross 4 lanes of traffic, the road can become a barrier to people in your community getting from one side of the street to the other, getting from home to shopping, getting from the bus stop to school. And so these projects we're seeing that they have a great benefit in just getting more people out walking in your community and in a corridor. And the other things that sometimes we don't think about, but Phil did mention, is this idea of increased economic vitality. When people feel safe walking and biking, when there is a place along the sidewalk or a wide enough sidewalk for social interaction, for shopping, for mingling, your business district often does better. And so we'll hear some great information from a couple of greater Minnesota cities where the 4 to 3 lane conversion has really helped to revitalize Main Street. And then finally, many of these projects, if they're more than a mill and overlay, if they're a full reconstruction of the road, often provide the opportunity to redo utilities below the street. So new water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure. So many of the communities, when they've done one of these major roadway reconstructions, really think about what do we want to do differently with our stormwater to improve a wetland area or a stream or a lake in town. So this is my final slide before we really dig into the nuts and bolts of a road diet, or a 4 to 3 lane conversion. See, it's very ingrained. So used to saying. I think what we found is there are a lot of candidate projects out there across the state, and there's probably a project in your community, in your city, on a county road, on a MnDOT road. And that's because for many, many decades, when we thought about road projects, we thought bigger, faster, better. You know, we want to keep the cars moving. We want to make sure that they don't have to slow down at rush hour. And what we found is in some of our corridors, the amount of traffic that we thought was going to occur in the future hasn't come to pass. And I looked at the MnDOT website the other day at the vehicle miles traveled and their estimates of traffic across the state. It was really quite surprising to me. Vehicle miles traveled per person has been flat for nearly 15 years. So that's the amount of, if you take the population of the state, you look at all the miles that are traveled in the state, and you make that division, you'll find that the number really has not changed. It might have bumped up and down just a little bit, but it's pretty much flat. And that the growth in traffic, the vehicle miles traveled overall in the state, is up less than 1% a year over the last dozen years. And so I remember when we were doing planning and evaluating projects when I was on the Metropolitan Council's Transportation Advisory Board, and we were using a growth in traffic number that was over 2%. And so we thought a transportation scenario was going to take place, but actually in many communities has not. Now, certainly we have roads where there's been a very significant increase in traffic, but that often has come from a major increase in economic development in that corridor, or a big increase in residential development. So I guess I'm really hoping that you watch this webinar today and listen to these presentations, and you are inspired to look for a corridor in your own community. And one thing that I think is good to remember is that these opportunities don't come around that often. That a road is milled and overlaid every 10 or 20 years, and it's fully reconstructed maybe every 50 years. And so if you don't take the opportunity now and really do some thinking and planning, and you say, well, we're not sure, we'll just wait till next time. The next time might not be in your lifetime. So anyway, something to think about as you watch these presentations. So I'm going to move to our first two speakers. So first we have, or next up, talking much more about the nuts and bolts, is Derek Leuer, who's a traffic safety engineer at MnDOT Department of Transportation. He's going to talk about operation safety and performance. And up right after him, we have Greg Pace, who's a design flexibility planner at MnDOT, and he's going to talk about performance outcomes, flexible design, and context. So, next up.
All right.
Welcome. This is your clicker.
Thank you, Barb.
The advanced. And
All right.
Arrow is missing.
Am I in view of the camera? Am I good?
You're fine.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Derek Leuer. I work for MnDOT in the Office of Traffic Engineering. I'm a traffic safety engineer. So part of my job is one of the things we do is that we administer the crash database for the DOT. So we get access to all the crashes. We do a lot of crash analysis. The other big part of what we do is we are in charge of the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is a federal core program that has about $36 million a year, and we help to divvy that out to the districts, so MnDOT districts, the counties, and the cities as well to help implement safety projects across the state. So one of the big things we've been promoting and trying to get more word out and trying to help support Barb and some of the other states and counties and guys like Jack out there is the 3-lane / road reconfiguration. So it's interesting, Barb brought up the connotation of the diet. I was actually going to share that same thing. I was actually at a federal workshop, Federal Highway Administration workshop, and one of the guys who was talking about 3 lanes was saying that they went to a city and they proposed doing the 3-lane road diet, and it blew up on them because everybody in that town had like a negative connotation of a diet. Nobody likes going on a diet. So I'm probably going to repeat a few things that Barb said today already, but that is something that is real, is this idea that a diet. So if I say road diet, I'm trying to include to road reconfiguration as well. But it's just that essentially redistributing the pavement is really what we're going after. So here's kind of my brief agenda for today. So I'm going to talk about what is a road diet, why consider it, some of the safety performance, speeds and operations that management of your roadway, ped and bikes, which is a huge thing, and then kind of some of these costs and opportunities things as well that we're kind of looking at from MnDOT's perspective. So what is a road diet? So road diet, road reconfiguration is kind of a vague term sometimes. It's kind of a blanket term. Typically what we're probably going to be talking about most often is this idea, as Barb mentioned, going from 4-lane undivided down to a 3-lane cross section, 1 lane in each direction, and a center left turn lane. Typically, the idea is reducing the cross-sectional width, or generally the number of lanes, so going from that 4 lane down to 3 lanes, 2 in each direction down to 1 in each direction. But sometimes it can even be 2 to 3 lanes. So this is the most common that you probably think of, 4 to 3 lanes. But there's also, in some cities where we've gone through, we've been looking at, they've got a nice wide cross-section that they use for parking, skateboarding, biking, motorcycling, horse riding, buses, tractors, semis, cars, and then you got your sidewalks on top of it. So some areas we've got through have super wide cross sections that we can go through, and they've only got 2 lanes, but we've gone through and made the suggestion, maybe use 2 of those lanes, then you can even add that 3rd lane to eat up some of that space because you have so much. There's a lot of different things you can do. There's also this idea of just going 3 lane to 3 lane, is that there's some 3 lanes that were built probably in maybe the 70s or the 80s that have really wide lanes and really wide cross sections. We can even slim those up sometimes too when we come through and reconfigure as well. And then even now, this is kind of catching on in some spots, is 5 lanes to 3 lanes. Barb talked about this idea of the traffic projections. We're going to go like this for the next 30 years, and we're going to have 35,000 vehicles on this road eventually. And we come back 35 years later, and it's still at 10,000 or 5,000. We can go from 5 lanes down to 3 lanes. We don't need all those 5. We don't need that 5 lanes. We really only need 3 lanes. So can we take some of that width, take that out of there, take away those lanes, and still have a cross section that still works really well for what we need? So why consider? We talked about, what can you do, but why should we do this? I'll be honest, I took this right out of the Federal Highway Road Diet Manual. Road diets have the potential to improve safety, convenience, and quality of life for all road users. And I'll emphasize all, that's important. Road diets can be relatively low cost and planned in conjunction with reconstruction or simple overlay projects, since applying road diets consists primarily of restriping. So really, we've already got this section out here, we've already got that width, it's just a matter of redistributing the pavement. And I'll talk about safety here, but I just kind of want to highlight this. One of the big benefits of road diets is that if you're driving down a 4-lane cross section like this and you're going, you're just trying to get through, how often is it that somebody stops in this lane to turn left, right? So you've essentially decapacitated that lane while that person waits to turn left. And if traffic volumes are heavy enough where they're coming this way, they're going to sit there and wait for a long time. And now you've essentially decapacitated that lane. Nobody can use it. And what everybody starts doing, and you guys have probably all seen this, everybody starts jogging across, right? They start switching lanes. They start kind of jockeying for position because nobody wants to stop and everybody wants to keep going. So that's kind of one of the big safety. This is kind of one of the big reasons why the safety performance increases when we do this. Is essentially, as I just mentioned, instead of jockeying for position or incapacitating this lane, people move over. They're out of that lane. They can wait there safely for the right gap to make that maneuver. And then when they do turn left, they've only got to cross one lane instead of two. So, one of the other things that we do for metrics to know that we're improving safety, one of the big things is this idea of reducing operating speeds. A lot of 4-lane undivided cross sections, if you look in urban areas, typically have an operating speed somewhere between 40 and 45 miles per hour. Once you go down to the 3-lane, typically see that drop to about 35 miles per hour, sometimes even lower. If you combine that with some other things like narrower lanes, pulling in shoulders, adding some medians at strategic locations, you can really see some big reductions in that operating speed. And if you're a pedestrian who's trying to cross this road, not that getting hit at 30 miles per hour is a great thing, but it's certainly better than getting hit at 40 miles per hour or 45 miles per hour, right? Kind of one thing I mentioned, this idea of reducing the chaos. When people are switching lanes and jockeying for position and trying to get around each other, it's just this kind of turbulent chaos that's going out on the road, and it lends itself to rear end, side swipes, pedestrians getting hit, people going off the road and hitting other items. And when you kind of go down to the 3-lane, you reduce that chaos. There's just less, I'll call it chaos. Bigger thing too, shorter distance for people to cross. When you got to cross 4 lanes of traffic that's going 45 miles per hour, that is quite the distance to go. When you got that 3-lane, you can actually kind of use that 3rd lane, that little bit of lane as kind of a refuge if you need to. So you only need to cross 1 lane. You can kind of wait if you have to, and then cross that 3rd lane again. So it's a shorter distance, shorter, what do you call it? Shorter exposure is the word I want to use. Provide opportunities for other users. Kind of when I talked about the tractors, the semis, the buses, we can have a lane designated for, I should have had this as a 3-lane. You can have that lane for the 3-lane, but you can also have a space for bicycles. You have a space for pedestrians if you have some roof or sidewalks. So there's a lot of different things you can do with the space that you've now found. If you're wide enough and if it's something that the community is interested, you may be able to provide parking. And parking is beneficial in the fact that parking can provide a lot of friction to traffic driving down the road. And when you provide that friction, you're going to reduce that operating speed up there as well. Trade-off, you might increase your crashes because now you have more people with more things to hit. So, but they tend to be property damage crashes. They're low severity. So sometimes to reduce that speed down 5 to 10 miles per hour gives a better opportunity for pedestrians, but you might kind of trade off for some higher property damage crashes with vehicle to vehicle. Kind of just matter what the priority is. I'll get into this a little bit later, but this idea of the multi-threat. And when you go to the 3-lane, you get rid of this thing that's called the multi-threat, and I'll kind of explain that in a little bit here. So what have we seen at the state? When we looked at our truck highway network and we looked where we've got 4-lane undivided and where we've got 3-lane cross sections, we've been able to notice a difference in the number of crashes. FHWA will report that in their report, they say they see a 19 to 40% reduction in the number of crashes on 3-lane sections versus 4-lane undivided. 47% is a pretty substantial number. That's a pretty big reduction in crashes for just moving some paint lines. When we looked at this, we looked at the urban 4-lane versus the 3-lane sections, we've seen crashes reduced by about 51%, which is pretty substantial. More importantly, fatal and serious injury crashes, which is our state performance measure for safety, we've seen a reduction of 35% from that 4-lane undivided to the 3-lane on Minnesota truck highways. And I will just say this is pretty similar to what other states have found. We are not outside the normal band of what other states and what the federal highways have been finding as well. So it seems like it's pretty consistent that if we're using these in the right applications, you'll see the crash reduction, you'll see that speed reduction as well. Kind of some of the reasons for that I kind of talked about kind of this idea of conflict points. You go on a 4-lane undivided at the intersection, you've got at least 8 conflict points. If you probably start counting left turns and right turns and rear ends and those types of things, you probably explode up to, I want to say 42 conflict points. When you go down to this 3-lane, you just greatly reduce those total numbers. So every conflict point you get rid of an opportunity for a crash. So some speed and operations management. So it can improve flow, as I kind of talked about, reduce those crossings and manage speeds. It can improve all those. Biggest benefit is we get rid of that. We can get those left turners out of the way. And usually the left turners are the ones who take the longest time because they got to wait for that traffic that's approaching them. It reduces the distance, the complexity of crossings, and as I kind of mentioned already, reduced speed differentials is that. One of the big things that a lot of traffic safety people tell you is that speed itself is not what's dangerous, it's speed differentials. So on a lot of these 4 lanes, if it's posted at 35 miles an hour and everyone's really going 45, because that's what the road's telling them to do, you're always going to have that good person who always follows the speed limit, right? And they're going to be going 35 miles per hour down this road because that's what the speed limit says. And everybody is going to be trying to get around that person because that person is going too slow. So now when we get that speed differential, that's when we got a lot of problems. And if you're a pedestrian trying to cross this road and you got somebody who just went by you at 35 miles an hour, you kind of gauge how to cross the road, and now you start crossing and somebody's coming along at 45 or 50, now you've got problems because now the brain is not adequately wired to know how to cross that road until it's too late. So when we get down to that 3 lane, we kind of get more consistent speeds, we get lower speeds, and it's easier for the pedestrians to cross, and for vehicles as well when they're trying to pull onto the road as well. So where do these work? You know, certainly we can't like go restripe I-94 into a 3-lane, that doesn't make sense, right? So there are places that it works well, and there's some places where it may not work as well. Typically, urban corridors, urban streets, city streets are really good candidates. They work well in that up to that 18,000 vehicles per day, which is a pretty high substantial volume. Seattle has put out guidance that they're willing to go up to 25,000 vehicles a day. Now, I have not seen that, and I don't know for sure. I haven't personally seen how well that works, but Seattle's comfortable putting the number out there, and it's certainly done it. And as far as I know, the world has not exploded, so it could work. Even for MnDOT, so 18,000 vehicles is a lot of your streets. It's probably most cities, most counties, that's probably 100% of your roads. Even at MnDOT, 90% of our roadways fall into that category of 18,000 vehicles a day or less, 18,000 vehicles per day or less. So even a lot of our roads can benefit from road diets or road reconfiguration. So as I mentioned, pedestrians and bikes, flexibility for other options. So we take away some of that pavement, we can redistribute it, but we can also do things now like sidewalks, boulevards, trees, lighting, ornamental fixtures, median refuges is pretty big, and then curb extensions as well, which are these bump outs you can put on the intersections to help narrow down things to make people slow down. And then just overall some more inviting environment for people to enjoy. So this idea of multi-threat. So this is kind of one of the big reasons why pedestrians really benefit from a 3-lane is, so if we have a 4-lane undivided section, what happens is you got people driving down the road and this guy wants to cross, right? So he kind of makes that gesture that he wants to stop, and you know, you get a good driver every once in a while who will stop, right? And they stop and they wait for this person. Now this person starts crossing, and they sometimes are under the assumption that if this guy stopped for me, everybody else will stop for me, right? And what often happens is this person starts crossing, and this person is close enough to where they've completely blocked all the lanes behind them. And this guy here could either just be going along and not knowing why this guy stopped. You know, people do a lot of stupid stuff on the road. I'll just stop on the road. I'm just going to go around it. So either they're coming along not paying attention, or even sometimes they're coming along and they see this guy stop, they jostle over to this lane and they fly through. And that's right when this person has walked into that lane. And so the person does not know another vehicle is coming, and the vehicle that's approaching does not know that there's a reason why that vehicle stopped. So this is really, if you read a lot of pedestrian crash reports that have happened on 4-lane sections, this is the story. This is what happened. So when we get down to the 3 lanes, you can't have this anymore. People will not jostle into that 3rd lane to go around anymore. So it provides a better environment for the pedestrian as well. Anybody have any questions on that? All right.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
So in terms of state aid funding from MnDOT to cities, is 15,000, 18,000 a lane conversion? That's in terms of using state aid money?
I believe that's an eligible expense. Yeah.
Eligible.
Yep. Jack is giving me the nod. Yep. I believe that was the first eligible.
Totally.
Expense.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm just going to talk quickly kind of about some costs and opportunities and some funding options as well. The nice thing about road reconfigurations is that they can be extremely low cost. It can really just be a matter of moving your striping around. It can be a matter of just hiring a contractor or even your own maintenance forces, going out, grinding up the existing pavement markings and putting down new pavement markings. It really can be that simple. But it's not always exactly that simple, but it may require moving some signing around to better position the signing. The other thing too is if you're in a signalized corridor, you sometimes have to move those signal heads to a better position over the lane. So there are some other costs that can come with it. Sometimes it is just as simple as moving the pavement lines, but it can be. Typically at MnDOT for planning level costs, we kind of estimate about $50,000 a mile to grind up those pavement markings, put down new pavement markings, and then do some of those siding, some of the siding and striping things that might have to come along with it too. If you got turn arrows in the road, you got to grind those up, you got to move them around. So there's just some cost associated with that. That's kind of the high level cost we use. And then we kind of add for every signal that you cross, plan on adding about $40,000 per intersection to move those signal heads. Another part of that too is going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes now, the way the traffic moves has changed. So you may need to retime your signals as well to have better operations as well. But that's kind of included in that $40,000 per signal cost. So, a couple mile roads with a couple signals on it, maybe $200,000. Certainly a realistic cost, not insane. But some other opportunities that you really should think about are if you got a mill and overlay coming up, which is really you grind up that top inch of pavement and then you put down a new inch of pavement. That can really be one of the best opportunities you have because you got to put down the pavement markings down anyways when you're done. Now it's just a matter of saying, where do I want to put the pavement markings? So really, if you're doing a mill and overlay, the cost from going from a 4 lane to a 3 lane is pretty much incidental. The pavement rehab needs to occur anyways, and usually it can be kind of done with pretty short planning and engineering time. The project I helped out on was Lake Elmo, Highway 5 out in Lake Elmo. We did a road safety audit the year before a chip seal, and we recommended going from the 2 lane to the 3 lane out there. And for the maintenance forces that were going to do it, it was simple enough just to say, all right, instead of putting the yellow line here, we're going to put 2 here. They did it in about a week. They switched the plans out for what they were going to do. So that one worked out really timely because it was right before some rehab, and it worked out really well. Barb mentioned reconstruction. If you're doing a reconstruction where you're actually tearing out the old road and putting in a new road, this is really the opportunity to do the right thing, to really change how that road is going to be used and operate. Don't miss this opportunity. This is the chance. This is the time to do some more substantial things too that are probably pretty much at the same cost of just putting back what's there as well, because you need to put back sidewalks, you need to put back curb lines. It's just a matter of where you're going to put them. So, these are more substantial improvements like sidewalks, boulevards, medians, bump outs. You could probably do these all for about the same cost as doing the reconstruction anyways. It's almost at no cost, just because we're putting things in different places. I'm going to share something with you. I will say a 50-year reconstruction life at MnDOT is not uncommon. I keep saying 50-year reconstruction, thinking I'm going to get my hands slapped eventually for saying, how dare you say 50 years? No one has done that yet because everyone realizes it's true. If we are coming through your little city, MnDOT is, and we are reconstructing the roadway, once that road's reconstructed, it is very likely that we will not be back for 50 years to reconstruct that roadway. That is the reality of MnDOT's funding situation right now. Is that so this is the opportunity. As Barb said, if you think we're just going to do it next time may not be in your lifetime. So I had one county engineer who kind of they passed the gas tax in their county, and he kind of jokingly, but not really jokingly, said, I can now, instead of reconstructing my roads every 125 years, I can reconstruct them every 75 years. So that is the funny situation, both for the DOT and many counties as well. So when these reconstruction opportunities come available, use them. So some other funding options as well. You can kind of just do these as part of your normal capital improvement program within your city, county, or state. Those opportunities, certainly, mill and overlays are every 7 to 10 years. Those can be good opportunities. Other pavement rehab things can be good opportunities. There's a program at MnDOT, or a federally administered program called the Transportation Alternatives Program. That may provide some good opportunities for funding as well. The program I help administer the Highway Safety Improvement Program. We have funded 3-lane conversions before, but typically it's been mill and overlays. We just cannot afford to fund a full reconstruction. So we do have limited funding, but it is an opportunity we are looking to leverage. So if you're doing a mill and overlay and would like to get a little bit more money into your pot, a 3-lane conversion could be a good opportunity that we would certainly be willing to look at least. Some real quick resources as I'm running out of time. Sonia Piper at MnDOT. I work right across from Sonia. Sonia is our bike and pedestrian safety engineer. She's been really kind of going out across the state trying to find good opportunities to do things like this. So if you have questions, she can be a good resource. Will Stein at the Federal Highway Administration is a good contact as well. There's this FHW Road Diet information guy that has a lot of good information. I'll be honest, I stole most of my presentation from right out of there because it is a good guide. We have a little website that's all about road diets, and Barb's case studies are on there as well. And then there's this really good little video on Fox right now that's 3-lane, it's kind of the history of the 3-lane and kind of how they work really well. And they kind of even talk about some of the reason why we went to 4 lanes in the first place and why it's not working, and then why the 3 lanes is a good solution. So it's a little 6 or 7 minute video, but it's pretty good. With that, I'll say thank you, and I'm going to pass it on to Greg. And Greg's going to come talk about some of the kinds of bigger things that are going on in MnDOT and how this fits in. So, any questions for me before I turn it over to Greg? In the 1 minute before he gets here. All right, thanks everyone.
Great. Okay. All right, thank you, Derek. Make sure I know how to work this thing. All right. My name is Greg Pace. I work for MnDOT in the design flexibility area. And part of what I do is I help our staff and people around the state, county, city people understand kind of how right sizing of roads fits with the evolution of transportation planning and design, more specifically in Minnesota here, and also applicable to counties and cities, and a little bit about the evolution of road design nationally down to the local areas. And in MnDOT, we call road diets a little different thing. We call it right sizing of roads, or at least that's what we call in the area that I work in. So we do what we call performance-based practical design, and that's using a complete streets approach. And I'll get into that a little bit in my slides here. So, but try to remember the term right sizing, and I'll try to remember that too as I go through this in place of road diets. So, like I say, part of what I want to talk about is evolution of transportation planning and design. And Barb and Derek have touched upon actually, things are evolving. It seems like maybe it goes at a glacial pace. Maybe it's going faster now with climate change. Who knows? But, things do evolve, and that's part of what I want to get into just at a very high level, and how right sizing is part of that. I think Barb or Derek alluded to the fact that some of the philosophy in the past has been that wider, straighter, faster is better, and one size fits all. And, that really applies to freeways out in rural areas, but it doesn't really apply very well to almost any other kind of place. And that's part of the evolution of transportation planning and design, is being more context sensitive and being more attentive to outcomes for everybody, not just for people when they're driving their cars. So like again, so PBPD is the shorthand for performance-based practical design, and we say we use a complete streets approach. Basically, what this is about is getting the best bang for the buck at all levels across the highway system, from across the state to across town to down the street and probably down the alley in the case of communities. And then basically the second part of this is about trying to achieve desired outcomes. And Derek talked about, and Barb talked about some of the outcomes of road diets, right sizing, safety and performance outcomes for everybody, and not just for people when they're driving cars. And then part of the approach that we talk about and are using in training that we do, both at the state level and helping people at the county and local level, is talk about flexible design using a complete streets approach. And I'll get into that a little bit more. And but keeping in mind that really what I'm talking about here, even though it's maybe more state focused, really is applicable at all levels and all jurisdictions. So performance outcomes. Here's one way of looking at it. Part of what I'm working on right now is helping to revise planning and design guidance at MnDOT, including updating the MnDOT Road Design Manual. And one of the things we're trying to help is to broaden the understanding of what performance is about and what the outcomes are we're trying to achieve, and using that as part of the framework for how we do things now and in the future. And so basically, and especially from a complete streets standpoint, the outcomes on the left come almost straight out of the complete streets legislation. We're trying to make it so that people of all ages and abilities can get to their destinations reasonably safely, efficiently, and comfortably, no matter which way they choose, if they want to walk to where they're going or if they want to drive their car or whatever it is. And then based on Minnesota statutes, there's also some other goals that help us, in a sense, kind of dive deeper into this, or actually help to set some priorities in terms of what some of the priorities might be in some of these outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And at the bottom, but not least, includes things like increasing walking, biking, and transit by giving highest priority to modes with the greatest people moving capacity. So I talk about this sometimes as this is our, at least for MnDOT, this is our job description. And in a sense, this is kind of like the short checklist for people when they're scoping projects. Is your project going to achieve these things? Can you check off the box and say, yes, this project will do that? If you can't, then you probably need to circle back and think again about what you're doing and why you're doing a project maybe to begin with. So like I say, the evolution of this, it used to be kind of a one-size-fits-all, blasted through kind of an approach, not really thinking too much about the different kinds of places. And I'm probably being a little bit, maybe a little bit exaggerating that, but in a sense, that's kind of how things have happened in the past. And I have to say, in Minnesota and in MnDOT, I think we've done a better job maybe than some other places. So I think we should pat ourselves on the back on that. We have, for quite a while now, been a context-sensitive agency at MnDOT, trying to be cognizant of at least that we have different places that are urban and rural and small towns that are different, and we need to treat them different. And so this is part of that evolution. So what we've done recently is we've developed what we call land use context types. This is basically taking the land use planning that happens and putting the MnDOT lens on top of it as part of the framework for the planning and design structure that we're developing. And so these, for people that do, planning in a community or at a county or even at the state level, these should be pretty familiar kind of land use categories when you're doing land use planning. We've kind of created our set of 9 to use as part of this framework that's being developed. And then this, what we're calling right now a new geometric design framework, actually comes from the federal level. There's some research that was done, and that research has been incorporated into what's called the AASHTO Green Book. And the Green Book is kind of the Bible in a sense for state transportation planning and design. And it's a policy. It's not road design requirements, but it's very influential at the state level in terms of how things are looked at and how it's done. And so the new version of the AASHTO Green Book has this new geometric design framework, which incorporates context and functional class as a basis of the framework. And so we're developing our version of that at MnDOT as we're refining and evolving how we do things. And this is conceptually kind of a process and flow diagram of how this new framework might work. So on the left is what we're calling context, which is this combination of land use type and road type. And then within that, there's the users within these contexts. And then part of that then is these performance outcomes. The 2 big questions that we ask with any kind of project, or we should be asking based on our guidelines, is who are we serving and what are we trying to achieve? Those are the 2, really the start. And, I think, there's an interesting point about road diets is kind of for some people, it might be kind of a controversial term. I think if we back up sometimes and go back to the basics of maybe those 2 questions on a project or in discussions, who are we serving and what are we trying to achieve? Maybe that's a good starting point for projects. Kind of takes it away from the what's already there, where are the stripes on the road kind of a thing, to bring it back to people and, and what's best for people in the community, not only when they're trying to get from A to B, but for the businesses and all the different aspects of what goes on in the community. And then lastly but not leastly, just a few considerations here. And, it's probably fresher in people's minds right now in terms of the snow and ice. I mean, operation and maintenance is a big part of trying to achieve outcomes. And when it's the middle of the winter and it's 90 degrees, we don't necessarily think so much about snow plowing. But it's an important factor in terms of the balance, finding the balance in best serving users and achieving outcomes. So like I say though, first, why did the toys cross the road? If you remember back to Toy Story 2, it's been a long time now. I think there was a chicken shack on the other side, if I remember right. But especially as state transportation people, we tend to think so much about people getting someplace a long distance and just kind of going straight through traffic and all that. But in many places, especially in communities, it's as much or maybe more about people getting across the road to the chicken shack. And so I think in some ways we need to start with crossing the road to get to the chicken shack and then get to the through traffic after that. Again, context is king. I've talked about how AASHTO and MnDOT are embracing this and using it. The three things that I think are important to think about are trucks, tractors, and again, snowplows. They all provide challenges, especially for state highways in urban areas and communities. Trucks and tractors do need to get through, but they don't need to get through quickly. They don't need to be the king of the road in a sense. And the other thing about this seasonal thing that we deal with, some people in the past have said to me, "Oh, complete streets, that's great for California where there's no snow, but we can't do that here." Well, part of the mix in this whole thing, I think, is temporary or seasonal features. Some places you'll see these signs plopped in the middle of the road that stop for the pedestrian and crossing sign. Those things can get yanked out in the winter. There's a lot of opportunities to do things like that, to do seasonal kinds of design features which help to achieve outcomes. And I think personally they should just be a regular part of the road design package and the approach that we take. That's it for me. Any questions?
Yeah, so don't we sometimes see a corridor where, I'm trying to think where, during the winter, well, certainly during snow emergencies or extended emergencies, the parking simply gets removed, which is a challenge, but it does add road width during maybe only 2 months of the winter.
Right, yeah. I think so. What Philipp is touching on is the operation and maintenance aspect of how we do things. In a bigger central city like Minneapolis and St. Paul, or even some of the suburbs where they do call snow emergencies, that's a big part of the balance in this performance-based practical design using this approach. But it's not one that we necessarily kind of think of in the same way as we do in terms of how wide a lane should be or how wide the parking should be or whatever. But in my mind, it's key. It's part of the key aspect of the approach.
Those were terrific presentations. Thanks very much, Greg, and thanks very much, Derek, for really giving us a good foundation in thinking about these kind of projects, both the rationale and the context. So we're going to move into the next part of our agenda, which is the case study discussion. I can't remember, I guess it was Derek mentioned these great publications that are available from the Federal Highway Administration, and one of them is all about case studies. And it does have case studies from all around the country, but when I looked at that, there wasn't a single example, I don't think, of Minnesota in that guidebook. There are a lot of examples from Michigan, and certainly the Iowa DOT's website has all sorts of examples. But I know from my 30 years of work with communities across Minnesota that people want a Minnesota example. They want to know that a project has been implemented locally. They want to be able to call up a mayor and ask how it went. They want to know that in a context of snow and ice and tourist traffic and farm equipment, that the way a project works in one community is going to really work successfully in their own. And so that was one of the right reasons that we developed these various case studies. And Jack is going to talk about Richfield, which is really a citywide case study. They've done so many projects in Richfield. So I'm going to introduce now Jack Broz, who's a transportation engineer for the city of Richfield. I met Jack back when he was involved in the state's consideration of a statewide complete streets policy. So welcome, Jack.
No, thank you. Yeah, again, my name is Jack Broz, transportation engineer for the city of Richfield. City of Richfield, if you're not aware, we're not a big community, 36,000 people, and those of you that are in the city of 36,000, you have a city engineer, you maybe don't have a transportation engineer. So I'm going to be talking about several things unique to Richfield, more holistically, and I'm going to end up, by the way, on topic with the 3-lane kind of discussion. but it'll take me a while to get there because that's not how we think. That little end answer is not what we're after. I mean, to tie it into this, what is the vision of GreenStep, right? What is that city about? By the way, this is our Public Works logo, okay? Sweet streets, better roads, better Richfield. Do you have a sense of our mission at Public Works? It's much more than the street we're talking about. It's about the city itself. So I'm going to talk about how that's changed our entire vision of our community, how we get there, what is our vision of the Public Works as part of that puzzle, and I will get to a three-lane street. I don't know if any of you read city pages. Last year they listed Richfield as the best burg. 2 years running, we're the hottest housing real estate market in the Twin Cities. The hottest, Richfield.
Where's Richfield?
Where's Richfield? Who even knows? South of Minneapolis, bounded by the airport, and all these MnDOT roads, 494, Crosstown. These roads don't even work. Talk about transportation. Here, you don't need to read this. The summary is right now we're looking at either under construction or pending approval over $200 million worth of redevelopment pouring into the city of Richfield. And by the way, here we are. Here's the airport. That's Minneapolis, Edina, and Bloomington. So as we redefine who we were at Public Works, one of the things we talked about is, as a city, what's their vision? So we basically stopped all work, and we engaged the city. Can't read this, I got a couple of blow-ups, but we went through a visioning process to 50 years. That's a number you should all talk about. It's 50 years. The roads we were going to reconstruct were 50 years in the ground. It's a real term. So we said, council, I'll talk about our transportation commission, adjacent cities, all our commissions, human rights, arts, we brought them all together and we had a visioning session. And out of that came what we call the guiding principles. And these were then ranked by order. And let me show you now what the ranked order looks like. Number one, multimodal design. The most important thing to advance the city towards its 50-year vision is effective multimodal design. Now, I'm the engineer. It gets a lot fuzzier at this point. I'm not the planner. Connectivity, the public realm, local economy, designing for people, community character and identity. Inside of there is public art, sustainable solutions, healthy and active lifestyles, fostering our unique location, which is next to the airport, minutes from downtown. Okay.
Bye now.
So when I talked about a second ago, the Transportation Commission. So in this process, Greg talked about the MnDOT. By the way, selfless promotion, there is training MnDOT offers on complete streets. I can walk you through this in a more methodical way for complete streets. But it's a process that methodically starts with taking your technical analysis, going out to the public, talking about the problem first from their point of view, not even designs. Our second open house, all we bring is, if that's a problem statement, can you please verify that? These are maybe the things that we could do. We don't even have a layout. Then we bring in options at 3. You weigh them, you compare them, you contrast it, and you finally get to a preferred alternative that you bring to council. But in between here, you see we have a commission that not only evaluates the public commission appointed by council, that they evaluate all our work. And you may not be able to read this, but this says the Transportation Commission recommendation to council. Staff does not make the recommendation. It's a citizen commission that makes the recommendation after all of that vetting. The time we step up is if somebody's house, something controversial, we won't put citizens against citizens. But this is a citizen-developed process that advances the community. I will guarantee my opinion isn't the final answer very often, because they see it better than I do. I only have a technical eye. So we redefined our process to this. In detail, we do use checklists. So to achieve the multimodal, this is just how we look at pedestrian modes. That it can be, and I am the engineer, so we make a nice checklist. So when we look at a design, which is going to be better for pedestrians? Here's a way to measure it. I'm not going to read them all, but speed of traffic, cars, offset the traffic, crossing distances, number of lanes, median refuge. So there are things that you can say A or B. If this one's got a median, this one doesn't. It helps you make a determination technically to advise the Transportation Commission how to make A or B, because it gets pretty messy. So we have this for every mode. And so we methodically, and by the way, we start with pedestrian. So everything you heard today was car, pedestrian. We inverted. Pedestrian, 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 and car. So let's talk about pedestrian. I had a consultant that just finished this pedestrian master plan for the city of Richfield. He guaranteed that this is unique across the country. Our pedestrian plan is based on destinations and people, destinations and their value, people in their demographic need, age. You know, so you start to say, and this is a heat map that kind of comes to the demand. So we don't count how many people are walking across the street and make a determination if we should save their life or not, or make their life better. These are the people. So you got all of the social economic data and the destinations. And so that kind of sets the table when you do a project to say, this is the area of poverty. This is a county road. On the other side of the county road is the park, the county library, the playground program that has the free lunch for that demographic. Now, that county told me that there's not more than 15 crossing per hour. So we can't do anything. Because that's all they look at. So we've tried to shift the focus on people doing things. And the type of people, you get to the transit dependent. You get an emphasis out of this approach that you don't get by counting how many people walk here today. Because you should get a medal if you cross that street. Well, we talked about speed. I love the AAA. This is from a AAA study that was done. So speed is so important when you talk about pedestrians. So close to the Capitol, I'm just going to go political some second here. But if you look at this chart, if you go up, this is the risk factor, and speed is across the bottom. And they kind of plot out a dotted line for like a pickup, a solid line for a car. So if you got hit walking or biking at those speeds, I use this on all my designs. So for example, this one study, we did our traffic counts, and the speeds were 35 to 38 miles an hour. So if you're walking down that street using the chart, you got to decide if you want to get hit by a pickup or it's a range. But if you get hit, above 50 to about 80% chance that you're going to have a severe injury or worse. So should we do anything? This is how I work. I put that in front of people and say, should we do anything? Or is that fine as it is? Hopefully we do something, right? People count. Now, I apologize, this is not bicycle master plan. This is transit data from Metro Transit. They serve us. We're so lucky. We don't have to provide that as a city cost. The size of the circle is your boarding data. We have here plotted sheltered or unsheltered. You know, we have bus stops that currently have well over 100 people boarding that are unsheltered. Days like today. Going back to starting political, Metro Transit is struggling. Throw money their way. How do we use it? They tell us they can't deal with these shelters. Now, let me tell you, though, they have been responsive in that that red line represents, they saw the transit use. So 36,000 people. We have anywhere between 1.5 million to 2 million boardings a year. They saw the use along this corridor, and they upped the service to high frequency. It's the only one outside Minneapolis. Every 15 minutes, you don't need a schedule. It's like the elevator, it just goes back from Southdale, Mall of America, it's just back and forth. So they have responded based on ridership to amp this up. Orange line comes down 35W, the D line will come down Portland. It's an important part of transportation. I'll get to a three-wing. So we don't have a big tax base. We did our bicycle master plan, and talk about 50 years. I mean, when are we ever going to get to our residential streets? How are we going to do this? There was no money to be had. But somehow, I'll leave that as a hanging question. How did we get there? We have now, the blue lines represent all the destinations, driving the bicycle network. So our priority routes were established. The blue lines are the ones that are now implemented. The green lines are yet to be, but soon will be. In the next few years, they all will be. So what are we doing in Richfield, right? Here we go. 4 to 3 lanes. So there's some uncertain capacity of a 3-lane. Talked about, you know, they're like, I don't know, this is the engineering part I find hysterical. The engineers can't tell you any closer than, well, 15 to 25,000. I don't know, it kind of works. Depends on how much you want it to work. And this is what I'm just trying to tell you. How much do you want this to work? And why? So in our community, I'm kind of lucky because we're around 12,000. So we've done a whole bunch of 3-lane. So now we take a look at this. This was a 4-lane undivided. We're by the airport, so I kept concerning myself that we might land a few planes that were kind of big, wide road. So we had federal funding on this to reconstruct. And so that was like, this is not all the low-hanging restriping dollars. We're going to reconstruct this guy. Now, take a look at this. There is a dot thing here. So anyway, so you start on the outside, and I like to start outside with fitting. So you see the trail on this side, the sidewalk on that side, very straight as the old road used to be. I'm not a big fan of meandering pedestrians. Let's make a beeline. But can you see what's happening on this street? Crazy town. So what you see mid-block is what everybody talks about as a 3-lane road. All right. Now, at the intersections, if you start with pedestrians, we heard horror stories of crossing the street. So we went to our checklist and said, what can we put in? So we put in the median refuge. These are planted medians. So you got your outside bike lanes. So you started looking at making a difference for pedestrians crossing the street. But now to add that extra width for the median, we had to meander the street. We wanted to meander the street. Speeding was out of control. Driver distractions out of control. So then, here's how I make my new best friends. The phone would ring when this opened up. What were you thinking? There's things out there. I am so afraid. And I go like, well, we we had people say they couldn't cross the street. So you're slowed down, you called me because you're aware. They now have safe refuge, one-way crossing of traffic. Oh, I never thought of it that way. Thank you, my new best friend. So, yes, we ended up with, you know, the bicycle combination. We talked snow. We do our own maintenance of sidewalks, right? We send the guys out, we follow that too. They will tell you they can do twice as many miles because we have planted boulevards where the streets snow and the sidewalks snow, you don't have to fight each other. It's so much more efficient. And back to the checklist, shade, all the things, buffer from traffic to improve the pedestrian. So you start to see the win-win-win components. Crosswalks, say for bus stops. Used to see pictures of people waiting for the bus towering for traffic. I mean, what an experience. How do you change the fundamentals? The quality of life is your quality of your experience. Now, it's not all good, it's all trade-offs. So I don't want to give you the easy, there's nothing easy about this. It's trade-offs. And I'm going to talk now about cars. It is going to take you longer to cross the street because everybody's in a single file line back into the old two-lane road days. Be upfront about that. Now, we're a grid, so you got all sorts of options as what to do to fix that. That's part of the hard point to be aware, and especially if you're going to turn left. So crossing and entering the street from a side street is a negative, a car negative, for the benefits of everything else, not just a car, but everything else that you're going to do. You have to put it in the long-term vision. How do you think we get to all that redevelopment? What's going on in this town? That's what's at risk. And yes, we slowed the speeds down. In doing that, this is Wayne. Wayne said he changed his life. He's a motorized wheelchair, he lives on Portland, and he now just feels free to go out and move. He loves to get outside. And now he just goes up and down Portland, crosses the street, comes back, crosses the street, just because he can now. And it's like a freedom for Wayne. We engaged, we do this on all our projects now. We got the great palette. We learned from St. Paul. Steal the best ideas, share them. So we have our Arts Commission. Right now in the middle, if you're a poet, go online, find the Richfield Arts Commission, submit a poem. Because we've got a lot more sidewalks to fill. And so that's the kind of thing that we do. I'm just going to end and talk a little bit about the feedback loop, because this is not by Public Works Engineering by themselves. I talked maintenance. They'll tell you the benefits of these designs. Police, jokingly not, talk about revenues are down. Portland has a cop shop. You know how easy that used to be to sit at the cop shop and just write tickets? They can't do that anymore. Fire, they love our roundabouts. They get kind of squishy on some of the narrower median sections. Our parks are, we went back to our bicycle routing, all the parks, everything's connected. That's how we started. Everything's got to be connected for the people. Economic development, I showed you that slide. They have never been so busy. Never been so busy. And again, I have a checklist that I can prove over and over. So I'll just wrap it up and say, what we did is we were smart, but we sold it. How did we get the authority? Where are we getting our money? We sold better engineering. More effective. It was obvious as we started doing our first projects. So we hired a marketing firm. We branded ourselves. We embraced this new vision, sweet streets, better roads, better Richfield, and we sell ourselves. We actually do it with the spotlight and council can tell you about what we do and the benefits of the bonding authority that we now have to make Richfield a better place. So, questions or?
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Jack. That was truly inspiring. When Jack first told me that, I first called him when I was thinking about putting these case studies together. And he said, let me talk about Sweet Streets Richfield. And I thought he was joking, when he so that they had this program that was branded Sweet Streets. But I'm a believer, and I think we all probably are too. So the case studies that I'm going to talk about, so Richfield is one of the case studies that we wrote up and is on the website. The other three are communities in greater Minnesota, and one is located in Battle Lake, Otter Tail County, Parkhurst Prairie, Otter Tail County, Albert Lea, in Freeborn County, and then I just have a quick slide about the Maryland Avenue project in St. Paul, but that's not a case study. That's really been written up. And I really do have to say thank you to all of the city officials, the consulting engineers and planners, MnDOT for crunching the traffic safety numbers and just giving me advice, and Will Stein also at Federal Highway for helping to put these case studies together. So you're just going to see a snapshot from these 3 or 4 communities, but more information is available on the website and in the back of the room here. And then all of the case studies have contact information for folks at the city that actually worked on these projects. So I'm not really the expert. I tried to distill what I was told from people working in community. So Battle Lake, Minnesota, I don't know how many of you have been up there. It's kind of west central Minnesota. The project there was on Trunk Highway 78. City's population is about 1,000. Their MnDOT highway is their main street. It runs right north-south through the downtown. 4,000 vehicles a day, and it was a full reconstruction of 4 to 3 lane conversion. It was completed in 2014. So the city of Battle Lake in 2009 was really struggling. They had a lot of vacancies in their downtown. They were concerned that school enrollment was going down. They have this wonderful state park, Glendalough State Park, that is near the downtown of the community, maybe 5 or so miles away. And they were told that their state park was in danger of being downgraded because attendance was so low. And so the folks in the community came together and said, just what Jack would advise, we need a community vision here. We're struggling, and we need to think holistically about what to do. And so they put together a community vision plan. And one of the elements of that plan was to redo their main street. And they were told by MnDOT that it was about time for a mill and overlay on their downtown street. And after doing all this planning, they said, we don't want just a mill and overlay. We have a vision for something bigger. We want a full reconstruction of our downtown because we want to be able to improve stormwater management before it gets into our lake. We want to somehow have a downtown that feels more connected to the state park, that enables them to connect downtown to the park. And they want to have, there's a lot of tourists that go through Battle Lake, and they want them to stop. And they want to have more activity in the downtown all the time, but especially during these summer months. So they went to MnDOT and were able to convince them to do a full reconstruction on this road. This is the Trunk Highway 78, Lake Avenue. It's called Lake Avenue in the city. They don't call it Trunk Highway 78. It's called Lake Avenue. This is the road in 2013, and this is the road as it was reconstructed in 2014. And so we have good information now on the outcomes from the project. They've seen fewer crashes and improved visibility in the downtown. The police department says it's so much easier now for people to cross the street because they have these pedestrian bump outs, because there are only 3 lanes of traffic, and people can now get from one side of town to the other more easily. And the city is on a little bit of a hill. And so doing best practice on ADA was a little bit complicated, and you'll see throughout the downtown things like this ramp with its decorative fencing that enables someone who needs to use a ramp to be able to get around, and then still retaining the sidewalk elements. One of the things that they did in this town as they were doing their community vision is they really came together around the idea of public art. And they have a woman in town who's a mosaic artist, and she got everybody together and said, let's not just buy off-the-shelf benches from one of these catalogs. Let's design our own. And so that's one of the things that they did is, I don't actually have a picture here, but they designed these beautiful planters and benches that have mosaic tiles with images that were not just designed by the community, but they were also installed by the community. And that is built on itself to things like this gigantic deck fish in an alley that they improved, and some very beautiful bike racks and planters and things like that in the downtown. So just let me run back. And they were able to really reduce the erosion from the stormwater runoff that's going into the lake near their town. And this project has just really, it was just a catalyst for a long series of additional projects that have happened in the city of Battle Lake. They have had 21 new businesses form in their town since 2014. They have gotten just grant after grant building on this community vision, and now they have a trail that goes all the way from town out to the state park and through the state park, and they've seen a great increase in visitation, visitors and campers and bikers at the state park. So when I go to this town, I think this is a thriving greater Minnesota community, and it's a town that I know the community residents are very proud of. So next project is in the same county. It's Trunk Highway 29, Otter Avenue in Parker's Prairie. And this is actually a community that in the early days of them thinking about what to do, Jack Broz was one of the, when he wasn't working at Richfield, was a consultant that went up there, and he really talked to them again about, it isn't just about the road, it's about a vision for your community. And luckily, Parker's Prairie has the good fortune to be able to look within their county at what had happened in Battle Lake, and that did influence them in their decision making. So Parker's Prairie is primarily agricultural, manufacturing, service employers in their town. I think they're quite unique in that they have elementary, secondary, and high school in a town of just under 1,000 people. The MnDOT highway, again, is Main Street, 3,500 to 5,000 vehicles a day. And they decided, they also convinced MnDOT after putting together this community vision that they wanted not a mill and overlay, but they wanted a full reconstruction with a 43-lane conversion. And this project was completed in 2016. The goals for the project, somewhat similar to Battle Lake. They wanted more of a vision for community reinvestment in their town. They definitely wanted to make it easier for these kids to cross the road and to be able to get to the community pool and to parks and for people just to be able to get around in a safer manner. They wanted a more beautiful downtown, and they wanted to upgrade the utilities that were underneath this road. So the before and after picture, the thing that was a little bit unique is this was not, in the beginning in 2015, the road was not really a 4-lane, but it had such wide outside lanes and parking lane that it sometimes functioned. People used it as a 4-lane, even though it wasn't really striped as a 4-lane. And so you can see this is in the south part of town. I'm looking away from the downtown, so not exactly the picture that I would like to show you, but this is what we have in terms of before and after. And MnDOT has some folks that work on, they're called, I think they're called landscape architects, and a very talented guy at MnDOT helped the city to think about the design of their sidewalks, and he pulled the design of one of the pretty buildings downtown into the design of the sidewalk. And so they have some very nice bump outs, in town. They also got, I think it's called a Community Roadside Landscape Partnership Program grant, for the plantings, for the trees and the plantings. They have a woman in town who's a master gardener. She helped to organize a big planting day. And I think they're very pleased with, the results, and the downtown really looks very beautiful and functions. The roadway functions very well now. Crashes are down, as they were in Battle Lake.
Quick question. You mentioned that manufacturing was big in Parker's Prairie. Were there considerations that went into the project to make sure that it could accommodate, was it there special traffic or something related to that?
Right. I think trucks, the movement of trucks is always a concern, and that was one of the reasons that the center turn lane is probably wider than, it turns out now maybe it really needs to be. But, these were the early days of these projects, and so thinking about, the movement of trucks through town, I think caused them to widen that center turn lane to 14 feet, which maybe it wouldn't necessarily have to be that wide. I'm not an engineer, but I know that's not the thing, that's not the requirement.
But that's an example of how they modified the project.
Right. And every community, I think, really does that kind of thinking about, where do bump outs go, where does parking go, bike lanes, no bike lanes. So, yeah. Anything else I wanted to? So again, in the Parker's Prairie example is another community where this initial vision and the success of their redesign leads to more projects off in the future. And they're looking now at slow reconstruction of the road going in this direction, which is Sioux Street within downtown. Trunk Highway 65, which is called South Broadway, and Albert Lee, again, a MnDOT highway. That's also a community main street. Population of Albert Lee is a little bit higher, 18,000. The average daily traffic, about 7,000 vehicles a day. Project was completed in 2015, and again, a 4 to 3 lane conversion. And like Battle Lake in 2009, the situation in Albert Lee did not seem as rosy as it is today. Population had been declining. Downtown had a growing vacancy rate. And at that time, the city decided to participate in something called the Blue Zones Project. And I don't know if any of you have read a book called Blue Zones by Dan Buettner. But Dan Buettner is a Minnesotan, and he wrote a book about the healthiest places around the world, the healthiest communities. And he began to look for a place where they could maybe implement some of these ideas that he learned in writing the book about blue zones, and they picked Albert Lee. And the community really embraced this idea of community well-being, healthy living, healthy eating, reducing tobacco use. And they did a lot of very major community planning and visioning processes in their town. And the first reconstruction there was a big reconstruction and redo of their downtown. It was a $4.5 million project, and that was kind of the kickoff of Blue Zone's implementation. And after that project, then they said, all right, now it's time to move on to South Broadway. North Broadway was in downtown. South Broadway is the project that we have written the case study about. And again, it was a 4-lane. They wanted to improve safety in the corridor. This is actually an after picture. This is after the reconstruction of South Broadway. So you can see the before picture. Often we forget. You have to remind me, please take a before picture when you're going to do these major projects so that when we're going to talk about them later, we have really good images. So this is kind of at the south end of South Broadway, looking north into the downtown. And you can see this is one of the communities that did make the decision to put in a bike lane. So they have bike lanes on both sides of the street. Again, another 4 to 3 lane conversion. And the town is really, I think the town would tell you that they're having a real renaissance. These various projects have built on each other, and they finished one, and they're ready to move On to the next one. They have had, their downtown looks great. They have outdoor dining now, which they never had before when they had narrow sidewalks. So the summer feels very festive in downtown Albert Lea. They have connected up a really nice trail system there. And on the corridor that we've done a case study on, again, vehicle speeds are closer to posted speed and crash rates. So I also just wanted to mention a couple other projects, and I just think this one I think we will write up, but it just had finished up at the end of the season, and we didn't have time to really get out there and get any good, really good photographs. But Maryland Avenue in St. Paul, there is a 1.3-mile segment of Maryland that's between Payne Avenue and Johnson Parkway, and the road carries 21,000 to 23,000 cars a day, so this has the highest traffic volume that I'm familiar with in Minnesota. I might be missing something in Hennepin County that has more. But in 2016, there was a very tragic, all crashes are tragic, but this particular crash, a mother was dropping a child off at a bus stop, and returning to her vehicle, she was hit and killed on this road. And it had been a 4-lane. And there was then a big community process to talk about, what can we do here? And the proposal for reconfiguration went out for public review, and it was to take the same 40-foot wide cross section, which had 2 lanes in each direction, and restripe it as a 3-lane with a center turn lane. And they also installed a couple of pedestrian medians at pretty significant crossing locations. So this is what one of the medians looks like. I don't remember if this is the one at Greenbrier or where. I have it written down, but I don't recall. It is a road that has major bus service, a lot of bus service on it. So they do have buses going east and west on Maryland. And when I talked to the engineer at Ramsey County about this project, and I asked him, that's a significant amount of traffic every day. How is it working? And he said, it's congested 2 hours a day. In the morning for an hour and in the afternoon for an hour. There is traffic congestion, but he said it works better 22 hours of the day. And I thought, that's a good outcome. And it's just so much better to cross than it was before. So, and then finally, this is a picture that I was sent. So I haven't actually seen Glenwood since they did this reconstruction, but this is a project that former Commissioner Zelli, the Commissioner of MnDOT, talked a lot about. He seems just so excited about it. Glenwood is out in west central Minnesota, and they have a MnDOT road that's also a main street. It's Minnesota Avenue, and so this is what it looked like in the spring when I was out there before the reconstruction. In fact, the reconstruction actually started on the west end of the street, and then after reconstruction, this is how it looks right now, and I just think it looks great. And what's unique about it is the Glenwood project has, what we for a while we were calling cycle tracks, but I think they're calling them something else now. But they have a dedicated bike lane on this would be the north side of the street, and it's at the curb level, it's at sidewalk level, and then there's an amenity zone, and then the sidewalk is further to the north, it's over from there. So basically they have a 4-block section of the downtown where there is a bicycle trail that heads right down to their lake. You can see the lake is down there, and there are trails down in that direction. So it's going to be really fun to get out there in the spring and really take a bike ride and walk across the street and really see how it is functioning. So again, thanks so much to the people that helped put these case studies together. I hope they are informative, and if you have an idea for a case study, you can certainly let us know about that. I think now we will, that's the end of my slides, we'll bring our presenters up to the front, and we'll just talk about resources that are available, answer any questions that you have about these 4 to 3-lane projects, or doing a community vision plan. So, yeah.
Barb, you said amenity zone. What is an amenity?
Well, in amenity zone, that's where you would have, you might have benches, you might have, bike racks. It might be where, parking, meter is located, probably, you don't have parking meters in a town like, Glenwood, but it's not the middle of the sidewalk. So sidewalk, a place where it's okay, MnDOT folks, you should come up and describe. Greg is probably the person to answer the question about amenity zone. I may be punting a little. He's probably not.
No, I think you're doing a great job. It's one of those, it's kind of like road diets and right sizing. It's probably kind of like a terminology thing. I tend to think of the space between, say, the curb and in a place like this in the face of the building as the place where people go about their daily life activities. And so it's part of that. And so from a transportation standpoint, though, we tend to think of part of the sidewalk as being this kind of straight shot for people that are trying to get down the street so that it's relatively easy to do. We call it the pedestrian access route. And so basically kind of anything but that is, in a sense, it's good for, everything. And that's kind of what an amenity zone is. I mean, it's good for sitting, resting, sitting and having your cup of coffee and doing whatever you need to do.
Well, I don't know if it's too interactive.
It's a community roadside landscape grant. Is that from the Department of Transportation?
Yeah, it is. I know just a little bit about that. So within MnDOT, there was a community landscape partnership program, and that's run out of the Office of Environmental Stewardship, I believe. And so I think if you went to the MnDOT website and searched that, or just search, you'd be able to find it fairly easily. I think it's through David Larson's unit, so if you search that name, you might find it using that name too. And that's a program that partners with communities to plan and design different kinds of landscape treatments as ways to kind of improve some of that part of the community. And keeping in mind that landscaping is more than, planting is more than just kind of adding trees and shrubs or whatever it is. I mean, it's about functionality, and we've talked some about that in this. I mean, part of what we're trying to achieve with right sizing is to improve I think of it as improving the multifunctionality of the right of way. And it's more than just people getting around from A to B. Rain and snow, and we have ways that we can deal with managing stormwater that are better than maybe just typical hardscape solutions.
And if I could follow on, you look beyond transportation funding. Hennepin County, we've gotten a bunch of corridors where we've updated all the light poles to our city standard LED, just literally swapping them out because that's better than doing nothing, but that's not transportation funding. So this is kind of maybe what you want to start to look for. You look around the economic development parts of the county, and so it's just different than actual roadway focus funding.
I have a couple of questions related to the community visioning that you spoke about, your community was involved with, and then you mentioned a couple other communities that are involved with that too. How often or how frequent do you anticipate revisiting that, original plan that you made? And do you anticipate revisiting that every time you complete a project that you think is, connected to that vision to see, did it actually meet our goals? How can we improve on that in the future?
Yeah, we had a conversation about this yesterday. We did ours in 2013. You might say that somehow in the comprehensive planning gobbledygook that we just went through that it's in there, but that being so comprehensive, I think, doesn't have that spotlight on that focused 50-year vision. You know what I mean? It's just too wrapped up in the details of the redevelopment zones or whatever comes out of it. So we did our, because of time passing, that we were talking after we complete maybe another year or two of construction that we might take our new council through that exercise. We haven't determined that, but yeah, are we on track? Do you want to change any of this? So that's kind of, it's not planned, it's just kind of ad hoc at this point.
Okay.
But I think along those lines, especially in the Twin Cities area, there's regular kind of planning cycles, especially if they're tied to the council. So whenever there's an update of the transportation policy plan or the regional development framework, whatever it is, that in a sense is kind of done in conjunction with the community. And that might be a good time to, take a fresh look at any kind of community vision or creating those if they're not already in place. And, and depending on how often that happens, it might be every 4 or 5 years, it might be every 10 years. Maybe it's more often if it's a really active community like Richfield with a lot of stuff going on. If that's the hot place to be, maybe it gets so hot over here that we need to think about how do we adjust our vision to help move forward.
Derek, so you mentioned the accident reduction statistics. Are those comparable for pedestrian accidents as well? I assume those are vehicular or all accidents.
I think the stats I looked at have been all crashes. I don't know, I haven't looked at specifically pedestrian and bicycle crashes. Particularly when I've looked at the after conditions and on these 3 lane sections, I don't see pit crashes or like private crashes, or they're greatly reduced from before, but I haven't specifically looked at that. But the numbers, but I would assume some pedestrians and bicyclists are in there as well.
And Jeff, I had a question. Do you special assess for the project and specifically the Portland project?
No, we don't do assessments for any of our projects. When you start with the citywide vision, so what we asked for was citywide bonding authority to do all the work that we're doing. We're doing mill and overlay of every residential street, and keeping track of our share of the county projects. And so the theme, it's not your street, it's the community's vision that we're implementing. It happens to be on your block. So we do citywide assessments, not individuals, so we do that.
But Jeff, didn't Richfield have a utility fee that it assessed, that they were able to bond against?
Yeah, I'm not the finance person, but it's called a franchise fee, for those of you that understand. So we do franchise fees to generate the revenue. So everybody pays like their $5 or $10 citywide to pay off the bonds that have produced the ability for us to mill and overlay every street, hence the bicycle master plan being implemented. After the mill and overlay, we stripe the route as appropriate. So it's seen and sold as a citywide benefit, not just a corridor street benefit. Different approach.
So I had a question about, or an observation about congestion. So Barb, you talked about the 2 hours of congestion on the street, and Jack, you talked about the 20 seconds, 20-second slow down, or greater transit time in Portland. And so I'm thinking of, I was up in North Branch and talking to the mayor, and the mayor said, we just have such a problem with, the trucks turning here at this main downtown intersection, and the congestion is so bad. So I said, well, look, so I was at a loss to know how to sort of like analyze. So I said, well, let's go there at 4:30. So we went up and had a beer, and then we stepped out at 4:30, and we watched for half an hour. And it's like, we were trying to sort of gauge, we weren't quite sure how to count this delay, but it's like, I wasn't seeing a huge problem. And then by the time, it was maybe 5:15, and the city councilman came, and things were moving more slowly, and we left. But is there some sort of rubric or way to sort of gauge this issue of when is there congestion, what's the congestion, what's the increased transit time?
Yeah, I try to redefine it. So, for example, Richfield is very confined. When we work with the county on 66th Street, it's about a 4-mile across town commute. And so I tried to say the performance measure.
Yeah, the performance measure, yeah.
The performance measure that I'm going to use is travel time across the city of Richfield. I don't care what happens, how we get to it.
In any particular intersection, just transit.
I don't care about intersections. I'm overlooked. So when you started to do that, and so we went to conversion, we changed some of them to roundabouts, and the minute and a half that you waited, the traffic light went away. So now we're actually well ahead of the sustainable travel time across the community. But back to the spots. So we started getting the flurry of that 5:15, bus is always there, and I had to wait because I put in medians by the park so you could cross. And I had, so the mayor calls, oh, help me. Like, 10 seconds, all right. I know how many people stop at that stop, and Metro Transit will say average boarding time is about 20 seconds. So those 6 times a day, for 20 seconds, the mayor said, thanks. Non-issue.
Yeah.
So you got to do a lot of homework. You got to have a story, and you got to say why. Because that's the park, that's the people, that's the trade-off. It's trade-off. You got to be able to put it in context.
Good. I would just add, and Barb kind of hit on too, is, you got to kind of sometimes put it into the context of what the greater picture is too, where, it's congestion 2 hours a day, but 22 hours of the day it's not. What should our priority be? Should it be the 2 hours of the day, or should it be the 22 hours a day? MnDOT, sometimes we get challenged about things like, can we get farm implements down this road? And, our reaction is that, well, how often do you farm implements on the road? Is it 4 times a year? What about the other 361 days and, 90-something hours that farm implement isn't there? What's the other one that we kind of get sometimes? Oh, I had somebody once say that, well, that's our parade down this road. And I couldn't understand why going to a 3-lane would prevent a parade, but I kind of just humored the person. I'm like, well, what about the other 361 or 364 and a half days of the year where we're not having a parade? Should we think about that? And they kind of came around to like, oh, okay, so the parade isn't what we should be focusing on. Like, we can accommodate the parade. Don't worry about the parade. You get a lot of people who will find the one time of the year that something won't work on this, or the 1 hour. But try to put it into the context of there's 364 days and 24 hours. Maybe that 1 hour a day we can figure something out. We'll get around it. So.
And again, it's just keeping the perspective of the community vision's at risk, not this hour or this modal issue that we're talking about. So that's how you keep it in that context. We're talking about this.
Yeah, and I think it's stepping back and looking again at the broader picture and trying to frame it from that standpoint. And congestion means one thing to somebody in the car trying to get 50 miles down the road. But if you're standing on that curb trying to get across the street to the shop across the street, it's a little different kind of a thing. I mean, they want to get there as fast as they can too. And in some situations, it might be there's as much desire or need for somebody to get down the street and across as there is for somebody to get 50 miles down the road. And so helping to, kind of understand that and make that, help people, kind of think about it and use that mix is a big part of it. And part of what we always are challenged with is trying to, especially for state highways and some degree for county roads and some city streets, is realizing that corridor travel times is a way to think about things and probably define things that is more realistic in a sense.
It's definitely a challenge. People just get so fixated on congestion at this spot. And even, in North Branch, it's Sam's trucks making this right turn. It's like, really? And how often?
At a public meeting of rural, it was beat trucks. And during the debate, it was a public meeting, the police chief finally stood up and said, at that time, if it's a problem, I will have somebody out there directing traffic.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
That's it.
He saw the benefits, and he saw them slipping. So he was ready to make the commitment right there, public.
The Iowa DOT has about a 6-minute video on its website about 4 to 3 lane conversions, and they have a segment in there about oversized vehicles that I thought was really good and helpful and might, help in a community to talk about that topic. I know you have a question. Yeah.
Well, I have a couple comments first and a question.
Okay.
First thing, I work for the city of Red Wing, and I appreciate you guys saying about like the realistic 50-year. We're actually on a 60-120 kind of cycle. We're 60 surface, 120 utilities, so that's kind of where we're at. So I appreciate the reality involved in your comments. Another thing, I used to actually live on Maryland Avenue, and it's like night and day out there right now. So I have to give a little bit of kudos to, I went to a neighborhood meeting before they did the trial project out there. There are a lot of passionate residents for converting it to 3-lane, and it was kind of like torching the pitchfork. Kind of the panel of engineers was in the front, and they really got beat over the head with a lot of different stuff. So I appreciate them kind of taking their life and going with it and trying it out, and then finding it worked, and now it's out there. So I think as I'm an engineer, so as engineers, I think we can learn a lot from that too. My question is, I didn't hear a lot about like lane widths and stuff in this presentation, and in Red Wing we're probably going to be going towards 10-foot lane width for our standard for State Street. What's your respective experience with 10-foot lane width, or what's the limit on being able to use that?
I'm going to jump in and try to answer that. I know nobody's got an answer. So I put that into a research question that's currently a beginning of a research project, because these things don't have the life, much less the data behind them. And I would make a lot of arguments. I might be the one way over here on this conversation, but you know, your center turn lane is where somebody stops and you're passing, and so you know, I could default to 11 pretty quickly on that. But the through lane, most of the time has nobody to the left. You have a bike lane to your right, a buffered bike lane to your right. I start asking the question, how wide is that lane got to be? So I'm going to start, I'll just ask the question with 9, because there's so much nothingness. Because we're building something permanent. And the reality is that when it operates, and if there was somebody turning left in a bike lane, what do? As a driver, you probably slow down. That's a project goal. Thank you for doing that. So there's no answer. Nobody's got charts to how wide these things should be. So I've requested, and the university's taking a look at that as a research project.
And so in general, there's research out there that shows that there's some associations with slower speeds and reduced crash severity with narrower lanes, but it's not quite as strong as maybe we hope it would be. But in general, at least in MnDOT, with the recent performance-based practical design guidelines that have been published, we're encouraging people to get 10, to use 11 in a sense as kind of like the default lane width, and then go to 12 where it's really needed. But that's guidance, and so the kind of like the interpretation and use of that is really kind of all over the board right now. As far as the center turn lane goes, kind of the same thing. There's some guidance out there on that, but there's quite a variety of widths that get used in practice. The other thing about center turn lanes that I always am concerned about, and Jack, you know, what they've done in Richfield on Portland, is it? I think they've helped to address this, is MnDOT, and I don't know if this is true for cities or counties, but we tend to automatically go to the continuous two-way left turn lane. And so again, the two questions: who are we serving? What are we trying to achieve? What's the purpose of the continuous two-way left turn lane? I mean, are there actually needs for people to turn left? In most situations that I see, that could be left turn lanes with maybe something in the middle to help provide better crossings, manage traffic speeds, things like that. So one of my cautions is don't automatically go to a continuous two-way left turn lane.
So if you have the case study for Richfield and you go to the back and you look at the Portland design, I'll just tell you there's a lot of tricks of the trade. So we changed the color of the bike lane. It's monolithic concrete gutter. It's a bituminous roadway. You look at the edge stripe. If you look at that photo, you're going to see this exceedingly wide edge stripe. You see the engineering, is that thing still on? The engineers look at your lane width, and they look at it from the edge of pavement. So you come in from the edge of pavement, you put in an 8-inch stripe. I just took another foot out of that lane. Then I use extra stripes in the center. So I change the colors, but for the fire truck, for emergency, curb to curb is still there 20 feet. Curb to curb. But man, you got about a 8, no, whatever, you got some pretty narrow paint to paint measurement, and it's just paint.
So one of the things I want to bring up is, what we do is not so much about people going down the road. It's about people's daily lives and making it a good place to live, work, and hang out and do things in your life. And part of that is businesses too. I mean, in a lot of these places, like case study, these are the main streets of these communities, and these are the commercial corridors. And one of the things that we're trying to help people understand is that speed, there's a relationship between the vitality of the businesses in the community and how fast people are driving too. And so we're trying to build on information that's in like the ITE design of walkable and thoroughfares, which talks about target speeds for urban, kind of main streets and other kinds of busy commercial corridors, and information that's in the NCHRP 855 report, which gives some guidance in terms of target speed based on the context. And so that's part of the road that we're going down in MnDOT and in the state too, is what is the appropriate or kind of the suitable speed for people to be driving down a road depending on where they're at. One of the things that's really interesting is some of the projects I've worked on, planning studies and some design projects, in some communities, the businesses really get it. They realize that slower is going to be better for them. So, there's phrases that people used to use. More feet on the street means more money in the cash register. And I tend to use the magic number of 25 in a sense. So 25 as a target operating speed in a small city downtown or whatever. And some of the businesses really get this. Some of the projects I've worked on, they said, we need to slow this down to 20 to 25. Unfortunately, some of the people I worked with that were involved in the project management or some of the decision making didn't quite get it, so we didn't necessarily get to that point. But at least there's that awareness, understanding, and kind of voicing coming from the community, because they're the ones that really are there every day, and they know what's going on and what's best for them too. So I tend to think of 25 as a magic number. 25 means more 20s and 5s in the cash register. So maybe think about it that way.
And since 30 is currently the minimum posted speed that's allowed in Minnesota law, unless you have a bike lane, then it's 25. But I think there are people are even talking about, is that really, should we be changing that?
Yeah, there's been discussion for as long as I've been in this business to try and change some of the state statutes to, in a sense, allow 25. And it'll happen at some point.
Yeah.
So that minimum applies to, what are essentially highways that are being treated like main streets. The minimum would be the same and apply to that, even though it's still.
Well, that to me would be a goal. Yeah. Right now, the way the statutes are written, if I remember correctly, is that the jurisdiction that has control over that road can set the speed limit to 25 if it has bike lanes, but I don't think that applies to state highways. Any number clarify that? So I think that in a situation like that, then the Commissioner of Transportation would have to approve that and maybe go through some kind of a speed study in a sense, which is another rabbit hole that. I think Jack would have a lot of interesting things to say about that.
I need to go over there and talk about reducing the legislation. I couldn't be this close.
Speed studies are a double-edged sword.
Yeah, great.
So, sorry. So this, I guess, is for anyone. You're talking a redesign project lasting 50 years, but we're hearing that autonomous vehicles are coming in 10. And so has that played into the discussions on planning for communities yet in terms of, we don't need these wide lanes because autonomous vehicles are going to stay where they need to. We don't need multiple lanes because they don't need to be passing each other. And so has that been playing into discussions? Are you starting to hear that pop up anymore?
I'll say I've been hearing it. I've been hearing the same questions. Right now, MnDOT does have a connected autonomous vehicle office that's exploring all these issues. I don't think anybody has an answer. I think that is one of the great mysteries of what's going to happen. I like to say, I think connected autonomous vehicles are coming a lot faster than people think they are, but at the same token, they're probably not gonna be here and abruptly change transportation world overnight either. So it's gonna be one of those things that gradually phases in, but I think it's coming a lot faster than a lot of people realize too, so. But as far as a whole scale transportation system, I don't think we're talking about that yet. We're gonna be designing and building roads the same way we have been for a while.
And there's a lot in some of those discussions that are being had, but you know, you're gonna just signal for your car to come, and it's driving with nobody in it. So are you actually creating more car trips because you're not parked? Yeah, so it's a lot of unknown at this point, but for sure, they can drive closer together, a lot of capacity things will change.
All right, well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening in to the presentation and for being here in the room, and I'll turn it back over.
Yeah, thank you all. So a round of applause for